All right, welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Tonight, my guest is Eric Hecker. Before I bring him on, I just need to remind you that, of course, you can always get new regular episodes free on Rokfin, Odysee, and all podcast platforms. Check us out on Rokfin. That's where you get all of our premium content and regular shows. You can always also get the premium content from every content creator on Rokfin. It's an amazing platform. They've got so many people joining up now. Go check it out. You can get a free account and see who's there. Also, we've got our merch store up. Go get yourself some t-shirts and stickers and bags and stuff with my face on it so you can wear me around. That link is in the description or fknstore.net. And finally, guys, if you're reaching that stage in life where you're feeling a little old and you're getting some gray hairs, you might want to check out C60 Purple Power. It may be the most powerful antioxidant known to man. It's helped me with so many things like energy, inflammation, well-being, sleep, you name it. You can even get C60 for your pets. Your pets can feel great. Click the link in the description. You get 10% off your order plus free shipping. Today I want to welcome back to the show Eric Hecker. He is a self-educated research investigator that takes from his many odd life experiences and connects with others. He was raised on Long Island, the home of the now famous Montauk Project. His childhood included being part of the Stargate Project, run by the CIA-DIA, and later on he had experiences in the submarine service. In 2010, he took a contract to work at the South Pole Station for a year. Always an avid researcher, it was not until he began working remotely throughout the state of Alaska that he started making connections that his own life may not have been what he thought it was. Now he's trying to help others to see that things may not be as we're told. Eric, welcome back, and how are you doing today?
Hey, Chris, I am happy to be back, having a wonderful day, and just looking forward to spreading the truth to some more folks.
Oh, hell yeah, that's my daily life, so that's what I'm all about. It's great to talk to you again. We're going to go deeper today. Last time you were on, we talked a little bit about your childhood experiences, your experiences at the South Pole Station, which were very fascinating, and just your thoughts on, what's going on right now and the nature of reality as it is. But we're going to go deeper. We're going to talk about some possible secret South Pole technology, even maybe weaponry that could be down there, as well as the reality that we're definitely at war. We're at war right now, and it's the controllers versus us. It's an information war. It's a silent situation. Is not going anywhere, and it's not getting any better anytime soon. They made us think for a little while that it might let up soon, but nope. They start hammering us back. So, yeah, we have a lot to talk about now. It's been a little while since you've been on, a couple of months. Could you remind everybody how you ended up stationed in Antarctica for a little while?
Absolutely, Chris. It was back in 2008 when the economy started tanking. Folks can recall that, I bet. And I was in New York. I had my own business, a plumbing and heating, 24-hour emergency service, one-man band type thing. But I was running and gunning at the time, but, paying attention to the lay of the land and seeing things getting worse. I was good enough at plumbing, but I was not this expert businessman to, go switching trades and figuring all things out as Rome was burning. So I started just looking abroad. And in that search, I found an ad for Centennial, Colorado that I wound up applying to because I had relatives over there, and I thought, hey, that might work out. But long story short, they wound up saying, no, this job isn't in Colorado. It's actually in Antarctica. And I was like, oh, geez, that's a big sidestep right there, But since it was the only place in the world at the time that was willing to give me a contract, very literally, I was looking. That's how I wound up getting there. They offered me a contract to go to the South Pole Station for the summer season of 2010 as a plumber. It was during my 2010 season that I did well enough that they offered me a contract for the 2011 winter over, and I took that contract, and that's how I got there.
All right, very cool. Now, as far as your experience there, could you tell us a little bit about what you did while you were there, and how far did you get to wander about from where you were stationed?
What was the first half of that one again, Chris?
Oh, a little bit about what you did there.
More or less, I would spend most of my days doing maintenance work, and it was for the most part, mundane, going around, checking on things, making sure the heat is on in all of the buildings. I guess a lot of folks would consider it wild to go from building to building in the middle of the wintertime at the South Pole, which, yes, that was very challenging. And then the mundaneness would get broken by what we would say were moments of sheer terror, when alarms would go off and fires would start, or somebody would drop for a medical reason. Things would go south, pun intended, really fast. So, that was basically a day in the life of South Pole, was, checking boxes to make sure everything's okay until an alarm goes off. And then it's a whole different situation. But the folks down there, we did a lot of training before we went there. We did team building stuff, and everybody was assigned to stuff. So it was pretty well regulated. And the beauty of it, I guess, was beyond compare. That's something that I think is a little bit challenging to express to people, is that as mundane as it might seem, the sheer beauty of the skies in the wintertime is almost beyond description. You can't even photograph it. So a lot of the positive things about Antarctica, I almost can't even express to people. I can describe to people the challenges, people can understand those things, but I guess I need to admit that there's pros and cons to everything, and the pros are a little bit hard to express to folks. What was the second half of the question?
No, I was just about to ask you, did you get to do any exploring,
Yes,
well outside of where you were stationed?
Yes. First and foremost, inside where I was stationed, because of the job that I had, I actually had a key that opened every door in the facility. So that was, most folks were very compartmentalized. They had a special access key for the door that they can get in, but I had a universal to get into everything. So yes, absolutely, I was in every room, every corridor, every hallway, and it was very educational. Additionally, right before I left South Pole, I jumped on a snow machine and with a coworker, and we rode that snow machine until the South Pole station was a teeny little dot on the horizon, and we went into just the middle of nowhere, and that was actually really cool. We had silence at the South Pole, which we thought was the quietest thing in the world up until that point, but when we drove away, it was pretty quiet. Now, granted, we still had the snow machine running because there was no way I was turning that thing off at that distance. But it was still tangible, the distinct difference between the geographical position that we were resting at. And it was just awesomely beautiful to be. I think the term that one of the astronauts used was magnificent desolation. And that's very much what South Pole is. It's magnificent desolation.
Now, for the companies that you were working for, what were they doing down there? What was their purpose?
My employer was Raytheon Polar Services, which I have no love lost on that company. I think they are the devil incarnate in corporate form. I am very suspect to a science facility in a remote location like that seems to be continually subbing their work out to military industrial contractors. People that make missiles and missile systems are for some reason in charge of food production and janitorial services and maintenance at the South Pole Station. I work up here in Alaska, and there's plenty of other non-militarized corporations that can provide such services. So to me, it's extremely questionable when folks like Raytheon were the employer when I was there. They lost the contract to Lockheed Martin, who's the current employer. So, this stuff to me speaks volumes. There's plenty of other companies out there that do the same work, like ASRC or CH2M Hill, that do remote services just like that. But they don't make missiles or weapons.
Right. Well, what were some of the things that you might have seen or heard down there that may have got your eyebrows raised or sent a few red flags that some things that are going on may not be on the up and up,
Great question, Chris. In my travels there, doing standard routine maintenance and repairs, I came across a circuit breaker panel. And, we do standard, lockout, tagout procedures, de-energize equipment, inform people what's going on. There's policies and processes to doing this stuff, and just going through the motions, I came across a circuit that was energized that, according to everything I saw on paperwork, was saying that this is supposed to be de-energized, and for quite some time. Lo and behold, it's the circuit for the ELF system, the extra low frequency. So it's not de-energized as the facility is giving the impression, as the world is supposed to believe, but the ELF system is in fact energized and up and running. And that's a big deal. It has a lot of potential for nefarious activities. There's a laundry list to this type of equipment when you start studying things like directed energy weapons, what the components thereof are, and how they put these things together as systems across the globe. It matters that these things are on when they're telling us they're not.
Yeah, that is very interesting. And I think we should kind of go back to a little bit of our history with Antarctica, especially when it comes to the interest with the Nazis in New Schwabenland. And I don't know if you've heard, but what's his name? Charles Schwab, the new wonderful person in charge of some of this propaganda and COVID stuff that we're hearing about. Klaus Schwab, that's his name. Klaus Schwab.
That's what I was wondering if that's good. Yeah, Klaus Schwab. Yes.
So his
wonderful human being.
Yeah, his relatives or his ancestors, whoever you want to call it, was involved with New Schwabenland. That's part of his name. Did you know about that?
I did not. That is
very interesting
to me, and that is extremely interesting.
So when it comes to like the history of Antarctica, we can go back to World War II, of course, and all of it's as far as it is now, it's just stories and theories because we have no proof of what they were doing down there. You know, we always hear that they're reverse engineering amazing technologies, possibly off-planet craft and things of this nature at New Schwabenland. What do you think, and do you know anything about that history that may be of interest?
Absolutely. I think there is something to be said about what's been going on in Antarctica since we've been paying attention to it. It's definitely a hidden land, and people are taking advantage of that. In the original bird expeditions, there was a man by the name of Lloyd Berkner, and this is very referenceable, folks. Please don't take my word for it.
And guys, if you haven't heard the story of Admiral Byrd, just Google it. Go or YouTube search. It is amazing. There's a bunch of stuff you could find out about it, but please do so.
So when Byrd was doing his original expeditions down in Antarctica, he had somebody on his crew named Lloyd Berkner, who my understanding is he was both a pilot and a radioman of some expertise, some special radio skills. So he was down there in the early investigations. And then later on, he was one of the 12 people for Majestic 12. He additionally wound up getting hired on over at Brookhaven National Labs on Long Island, over with all the folks that were doing. He was with Werner von Braun with NASA. Yeah. He was with all of the folks that were involved with Operation Paperclip on the east end of Long Island. A lot of folks don't know that post-World War II, there was a place known as Camp Siegfried and what was known as the American Bund, which were the post-World War II Nazi sympathizers. They were all over the place on Long Island. And this is where these folks were congregating, and I believe that folks like Berkner, who went down to Antarctica and learned things, then got back into these programs, and this was the start of our actual space programs immediately after World War II. We had anti-gravity in the 30s, and it was only in the 40s that we got it here in the U.S., and we started to play around in secret facilities on Long Island that I'm aware of in my research. I can track stuff all over Long Island's East End, the North Shore, New Rochelle, New York, and then up into Rome, New York as well, which all of these places have a history of subterfuge and weird programs.
Definitely. And you were talking about Admiral Byrd and his secret mission down to Antarctica after World War II to basically find out what kind of technology these Nazis have down there. And when he gets down there, his whole fleet is basically cut in half by flying saucers. And, you know, this German voice comes out of nowhere saying, we don't want to destroy any more of your craft. And, you know, there's this amazing meeting between him and these individuals there. And it's a quite unbelievable story. Like I said, I think you should go check it out. But how much of that do you think is accurate. Do you think that the Nazis had these UFOs basically that could have taken out this entire fleet so easily?
I have no reason to doubt that. I really don't. If Byrd was a very reputable person his entire career, so I don't know that why at that point we would have shifted gears on his integrity. It seems that something happened and they just simply shut everybody up and classified everything. I have no reason to disbelieve that anti-gravity existed at that point because we have a history of things like the Sonora Aero Club back in the 1800s. That folks were flying around and reports were in newspapers. And although few and far between, we didn't have the information superhighway that we do nowadays to communicate these things across the globe. But what we can't do is discount everything that made it to print back then. There's too much witness and testimonies and facts that we can't just brush it under the rug.
So that being said, if there was a surviving kind of breakaway Nazi civilization down there in New Schwabenland, what kind of technologies do you think are around today, being that we've had all this time for them to develop,
I think we have no idea. I think we're so... there's so much disinformation and misinformation going around right now that people really think that we are at this high level of advancement and they're seeing all this wonderful technologies, but they have no idea what is available. As an example, in the Cuban Missile Crisis, one of the plans that they were thinking about utilizing against the Cubans was to have an American submarine surface off the coast of Cuba, and then using holographic technology, they were going to put an image of Jesus Christ up to then convince the folks there's a second coming of Christ to then disarm themselves. And that technology was available in the 60s. Imagine what's available now. Imagine if they turn the hologram machine on tonight and start whipping UFOs across the sky. What people would say. We've been trained right now for decades to believe only what can be proven and what we can see and blah, blah, blah. Well, what happens tonight if everybody sees UFOs? Will we get a martial law? That's the stuff that concerns me, is that the technology is actually so far beyond people's comprehension that they're going to think that it's legit. They're going to buy right into it. There's more issues at South Pole Station that I've been presenting to folks. I have documentation to prove that things are not what they seem. There are directed energy weapons and systems and components on this planet that are beyond what people consider Star Wars technology, stuff that we haven't even seen in the movies, that hasn't even tickled people's fancy yet.
Well, could you maybe go a little bit deeper on what could possibly be behind these directed energy weapons, how advanced they are?
Absolutely. So at the South Pole Station, they have what is referred to as the Ice Cube Neutrino Detector, and they're presenting this as a piece of science equipment that is exclusively receiving. It's a listening device, and the idea is that they have what they call a DOM, a digital optical module, which is about the size of a basketball, this plexiglass thing that they embed in the ice. They have a cable that goes down from the top of the ice almost all the way down to grade, which is about a 2-mile deep hole. And in this hole, they run this string, and it's on the string. They space out these DOMs maybe a few feet apart from each other. So there's hundreds of these DOMs, thousands of these strings, and it makes an array that's embedded in the ice over miles. So it turns out that I provided documentation that proves that each DOM, in addition to having a capacity to listen, each DOM has the capacity to transmit at 2,047 volts per DOM. There's 5,160 DOMs in this detector. So besides detecting, when they flip the switch and they want to transmit, they have 5,160 DOM phased array, which to me is a hidden harp assembly in the ice. And to most of the folks that I've been discussing this system with, it seems to have a multitude of options, similar to the laundry list of things that HARP can be accused of doing. It's just imagine another HARP, by another definition, hidden in another remote location. And people want to say, well, what does that mean? It means they've been lying. It means this is another thing they've been lying about, and now we have to question all possibilities. What could this thing be doing? Well, it could be a mind control device. It could be a weather manipulating device. It could be causing earthquakes. But people don't want to, this sounds like fanciful and sci-fi and crazy, and I must be a lunatic to be presenting this.
Well,
or this is legitimate technology.
I'm going with the latter because they're always going to be, people say 50 years ahead of. I think they're a lot further ahead than just 50 years with technology. I think they have things that we couldn't even comprehend. But when you look at Antarctica, I mean, almost the whole thing's like a no-fly zone. So, and there's so much coverage. There could be anything.
Misconception as well. I mean, I'm here. I have a map over my head. This is from the program. This is Antarctica, and on the key of the map, it shows a little thing that indicates what would be a no-fly zone. Well, I'm looking all over this map for this no-fly zone that everybody keeps telling me about, and I can't find it.
So does that mean we can fly over parts of Antarctica with no problems, or what's the deal with that?
I don't know where people are getting their information from. I mean, this is the problem with the position that I have in the world. I get a lot of other people that hear all these things, oh, did you hear this about Antarctica? Did you hear? Yeah, I hear everybody hearing that, but I have actually spent a year there, and I need to start undermining all of these baloney stories that people are hearing, and I don't know how to do it without coming across, poorly, but it's not a no-fly zone. I mean, there's planes flying over there all the time. I'm told first and foremost, there's planes in Antarctica flying all the time, right? So that's what this map is for, so that there are guidance for the pilots that are on continent and flying around it. There's companies that do that. There's militaries that do that. So with that being said, these folks need true maps. And on those maps, I'm not finding anything that says, don't fly here.
Interesting. I'm just wondering why, like you said, why would everybody think? I've heard that, not just from, talk show hosts and people who don't know crap. I've heard that from pretty learned and educated people. So that's very interesting that there's actually not a no-fly zone.
The other thing that people often hear about Antarctica, which seems to be the common statement, is nobody's allowed to go to Antarctica. Also, a bogus statement. Anyone can go to Antarctica. Cut a check and go. Do you have the money? There's nothing stopping you.
It's not that easy to get there, I imagine, but yeah.
I'm not saying it's easy. Yeah, correct. It's not but again, it's this misconception, this disinformation that's put out there, which it's promoting people not going there, but it's not preventing it. It's a commercial, so to say. They're branding an idea that Antarctica is this verboten continent. You're not allowed to go there. That's wholly not true. You are allowed to go there. Anybody can call their travel agents and book a trip to Antarctica. You can pick the cruise line. You can pick the flight. You can pick anything that you want to do. But what you have to do is pay for it. And that's the actual trick of this, is that this happens a lot on our planet, is that they make things for the elite. Now we need to question that.
Now, speaking of the elite, we had this huge big deal a few years ago where, all the politicians and Buzz Aldrin and everybody went to Antarctica for who knows what. I mean, I don't know. I don't think much information was released about what they were actually doing there. Do you have any thoughts about that? Because, from what I've heard from different sources, not necessarily mainstream sources, but people say that something down there is like an elite Disneyland that they're going to check out. So what do you think they're talking about there?
I think there's some merit to that because, having been to the South Pole Station where these people are going, right? I've been in the conference room at the South Pole Station. I can assure you there's no reason that they need to be in that conference room to have the conference. Whatever they're discussing, they don't need to risk life and limb. Seriously, to get to the South Pole Station, to be in that level of remoteness is in and of itself an express danger. So to do that, it makes no sense to me. There has to be some other motive. There has to be a rhyme to that reason, and I don't know what it is, so it comes across as extremely peculiar to me. It's a very dangerous place to go to. I remember one time, I mean, people do visit there. So again, I was at the South Pole Station and people were visiting. So there goes that whole idea of people aren't allowed to go to Antarctica. There were straight up tourists flying in. So
Right. Now I want to remind the audience, leave any questions for Eric or comments in the chat, and we're going to go ahead and get to those as soon as possible. Now, somebody mentioned earlier about Montauk. Now, you had possible memories that you could have been involved with projects at Montauk, right?
yes, yes, and I'm actually doing due diligence to speak to some folks. I've been in contact with Stuart Swerdlow recently and trying to contact with him because that should be a good connection point for me.
Now, when did you start having recall about this?
That's actually really interesting. A long time ago on that one. And that kind of got the ball rolling for me on so many other things. I had walked into a bookstore on Long Island. Oh, geez, this would have been maybe early 2000s, 2005-ish, maybe. Walked into a bookstore, saw the bargain books on sale right at the front door. I picked up a book. It was called Weird New York. I opened up the book. The page that I opened to had the Sage Radar Tower. I looked. I saw the picture of the tower, and I'm like, oh, I remember that. Montauk, huh? And I start reading the story. And then as I'm reading the story, I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. Why do I remember this picture? Because now I have no reason to know why I remember this picture, and it kind of freaked me out. And I became intrigued by the Montauk Project. And then it was just through, I guess, years of research and looking into things and questions that were caused. Long story short, here I am with a lot of dots connected that put me right in the program.
Now, maybe you could tell us about some of those dots that you found out along the way.
Oh, you got it. Yes. So, what I have figured out is that in my grammar school was a shifty Catholic school, and they apparently were doing something with the CIA, who was subbing out the Monroe Institute's Stargate program at the time. And I would get pulled out of my classroom, brought to the library, and we were training in remote viewing, even though they weren't telling me that at the time. They weren't really describing what they were attempting to do. They were just running us through what I now know to be the regimentation of the Monroe Institute program. There's this very specific. We were doing the ideograms, scribbling the line, and the inquiry as to what do you see, what type of geography, is it mountains, is it water, all of those things. And now it all makes sense because I'm familiar with the program. When I was a child, I found it to be the most confusing, weirdest thing in the world because they were, asking me questions for which the answer didn't matter, which as a child in a Catholic school raised in a very stoic German environment, I mean, everything mattered. Someone asked you a question, you gave an answer, and the answer, everything mattered. So to be in that library and all these adults saying, what does it look like? What do you see? And, tell us anything. It doesn't. And I was not understanding the question. So I guess looking for more input. Like, what are you getting at, ma'am? Like, what do you want to know? Oh, well, don't think so much. It doesn't matter. There's no answer that you can give that's wrong. And in a way at the time, this is the early 80s where my brain was at as a kid. So in my head, I'm thinking, where my thoughts come from the adults around me, I'm thinking this must be some hippy dippy stuff that I'm not familiar with, was what I was thinking in my head. I don't have to understand it, but it gets me out of class. And that was, where my brain was at the time.
So your family apparently had to have some high level involvement, right?
I believe so in some capacity. I believe that my grandfather, I know my grandfather was in the Bund. I know that for a fact. So that faction that I told you about that was working with the Germans post-World War II that were sympathizers, I know my grandfather was part of that. I know that he was going out to Camp Siegfried with regularity. So in some capacity, I believe, I have to believe in my head that what my grandfather was doing he thought was best and best for me. But I my nose at that.
Right. Now
that's what they say about these bloodlines, actually, too, Chris. They do say that these MK Ultra things and these bloodlines, that the families do believe that it's good, that they've been doing this for years, and that in their brain they see it as good. Like, hey, take this kid, and we're going to make this kid better.
Yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about. I mean, I've spoken with a few people that supposedly have been involved with these projects, and I want to get to a couple of questions in the chat. Mary Kay asks, this is about Antarctica before we move on from this. Is there, let's see, I just saw the question. Is the entire continent accessible to tourism in Antarctica?
I would say that the entire continent is accessible depending on your budget, because anybody that wants to has set up expedition. I want to go ski here. There's the only thing stopping you is your finances.
And she also asks, as far as the Montauk situation, were you involved with any remote viewing?
Yes, tons. From my understanding, that's what we were doing in the library, is they were utilizing me as a remote viewer, unbeknownst to me. I didn't even realize what was going on at the time, but that's what they were doing. Yeah, they were having me remote view things. They were giving me targets, and they were getting the info back, but what they weren't doing is telling me what was going on. They were making it out like it was some sort of like training or game or something like that. So this is what they're doing to kids. This is what I'm trying to let people know, is that this is happening all over the place. My father had no idea that this was going on. I spoke to him since, and he's apologetic and said I didn't know it was happening. I'm sorry.
Interesting. Very interesting. Now, let's see. We got another comment here from... where was it? I am losing all our comments here. Let's see. Montauk from Doubleheader GR comments, Montauk is not like the rest of Long Island. It seems to be significant, right?
That's very true. If people study the history of the Native Americans, even the Native Americans say that the Montauk Indians are not with them. They said they're different. They're from somewhere else.
Peter Baynon asks, has anyone ever heard of an underground base at the end of the Oyster Bay Parkway?
Oh, the Seafood Oyster Bay Expressway.
Have you heard of that? Okay.
Yes, and that's a lot of people rumor that's why they didn't continue its north trajectory. The Seafood Oyster Bay Expressway is about midway on Long Island, and it was supposed to run all the way from Seaford on the South Shore north to Oyster Bay. But they stopped it around Route 25 and never continued going further north. And a lot of people said, oh, that's because they didn't, the rich people, that's the rich community, and they're not going to let the highway go in there. And, that's one statement. Another one is what else could be there that they would be disturbing?
Yeah, exactly. Revolt Records says, do you have any thoughts about possible pyramids on Antarctica?
Pyramids in Antarctica?
Yes.
I know there's a lot of rumors of them. I know that people show one particular mountain that they call a pyramid. Excuse me. I don't know that I'm convinced of that one. But for the size of Antarctica and the amount of pyramids on every other, piece of land on this planet, I guarantee you there's something going on there. There's no way that there is not signs of life on that continent. And I believe that we've already found it, and they're just not discussing it. People fail to realize that these tectonic plates shift. Antarctica wasn't always at the pole, just like all the other continents aren't where they were before. The surface of this planet is changed more drastically than people want to discuss. As an example, the amount of ice that we have in Antarctica right now, everybody understands, is substantial. It's the most amount of ice. It's all of our fresh water they talk about. Well, all of that is sitting on top of a land mass that is, for the most part, below sea level. And when people start to consider that if you're to remove all of the ice right now and look at the minuscule amount of land sticking up out of the water at the South Pole, the Southern Hemisphere, and then you start to understand how much ice has accumulated on that teeny little amount of land. Now consider that the Antarctic continent is now moved more equatorial, and you take another land mass and put it at the Southern Pole, and imagine how much water that can hold in ice form, and how much that would deplete the rest of the oceans on the planet. Now, if you put another land mass like that at the Northern Pole, and we have two large land masses at our poles, you're going to suck up most of the water on the planet and have it frozen up at the poles. And our sea levels will drop down to a freakishly low level, which is what I think they were talking about in antiquity, and which would also be a good explanation for the Great Flood. It's just simply tectonic plate movement. ice accumulations and depletions, oceans levels coming and going. And this is the great antiquity of our planet that people just don't want to discuss. It's a lot older. We've been misinformed. You know, like we were saying before with technology, we are limited in how much technology we can imagine by the perspective of what we consider the history of ourselves here to begin with. You know, if we consider that we've only been here for 2,000 years biblically, it puts kind of a limit on where we think we can be at. But if it turns out we pull out a book that says, no, it turns out that 2,000 years biblically happened 10,000 times.
Right.
You know,
yeah.
That we just get wiped out and we get a new book and we get wiped out and we get a new book, and it just keeps happening over and over again. Like, hey, look at that pyramid. That kind of indicates that we've been here longer than what the paperwork tells us.
Like Mr. Hancock says, we are a species definitely with amnesia.
Yes.
Now, Peter asks if you could expand a little bit on the organization that your grandfather may have been a part of.
The German-American Bund is extremely referenceable. They used to have a lot of festivities in Manhattan. They were in full Nazi regalia here in the U.S. There's all kinds of pictures. Camp Siegfried was in an area known as Yaphank or Upton, Long Island. It is surrounding where Nikola Tesla's Wardenclyffe facility is, and just across the street from where Brookhaven National Labs is. I believe that the Bund was working with the OSS post-World War II to create the whole Operation Paperclip situation and become the CIA that we have today contemporarily.
Very interesting. As far as the black projects go, not only with Montauk and what could possibly be going on in the South Pole, but collectively across the whole globe when it comes to our secret space program, because from what I'm heard, it's not just it's not just us. It's a global thing that there are a lot of countries involved with our secret space program, but it could start with people being groomed at places like Montauk. What do you think about that?
Absolutely, 100%. I think secret space program type folks, I think, are folks that the system didn't function perfectly on. They're broken according to the program and the process. They weren't supposed to remember that they were processed, but they did. What that's giving us insight to is that I believe we're all been processed in our youth, just like I didn't know what was going on when I was a kid. My parents didn't know what was happening to me when I was a kid. So now I'm expressing this to everyone else to let them know, and their parents. Guess what? You probably didn't know what was going on either. You know, I was 18 years old when I joined the United States Navy, and I got contracted to be a fire control technician on a submarine, Los Angeles class. That means that they were going to allow me, an 18-year-old kid, to be trained for 18 months and then be able to push a button that could fire a potentially nuclear-tipped weapon and kill millions upon millions of people. I'm going to suggest, like you did before, that training the United States Navy wasn't waiting for me to turn 18 years old and choose that job and start the training. I think it actually started many, many, many years before, and I think a lot of us, if we pay attention to the path that we walked, we will learn that we are at a position in life more by the guidance than by selection. That many of us think that we're walking down the road, and every time there's a fork in the road, we go, oh, look, I have a free will decision to make. Interesting. Did you ever ask who built the road?
Exactly. Yeah, man.
No? And I think that's what people are starting to realize now is they don't understand the machinations of an industry of faux selection that we have around us in our world, this fake sense of choice.
Yeah, and it surrounds everything. And you're right, it goes into every aspect of our lives.
How'd the last election work out for everybody in their choice?
Right, exactly. That's a good example. C5 Circle asks if you had any ET sightings, UFO sightings, or even contact while you were in the South Pole.
Great question, and yes, I did. I did see a large UFO ball. I would say it was ball-shaped, and it was a flame from what I saw. The South Pole Station being at about 10,300 feet of elevation and nothing in view. It's just barren wasteland. I saw this come from all the way to the left, from the extreme left horizon, from my perspective, and it went all the way out to the extreme far right horizon. I can't even imagine how many miles that is in reality of it running a pin straight line. It never dropped. It never deviated. So although in my brain, I don't consider that what a ship would look like from what I was hoping to see, flashing lights and aliens waving out windows. But in reality, the fact that it was a controlled flight path that never dropped was what, in my mind's eye, made me have to just realize I saw something unidentified flying object.
That's really interesting. Did you have any experiences like contact or any type of strange, anything else unexplained paranormal while you were there?
Paranormal, I would have to say there was a time I was walking outside one time, and it was towards the tail end of the winter season. It was still dark outside. And I'm not going to lie, they joke around and they tease us and things like that for wintering at the South Pole Station is challenging. It's hard in many ways and on the psyche. So they would tease us at the end, and they use the term toasty. They say you're going to get toasty at the end of the season. You get a little bit off. And I was questioning whether I was getting a little bit toasty one day or what. But I was outside walking around, and it was relatively stormy. There was a light wind blowing, and the way that the snow moves across the ground is very pretty when it happens. And I like walking around outside when that happens. And on this particular day, I'm walking around, I'm watching the cool snow patterns, and it's usually very quiet there. It's so quiet sometimes that you can actually hear your blood circulating. I'm not even kidding you. And on this particular day, it was windy out, and I was having trouble distinguishing. I was trying to hear if I was hearing my blood circulating, or it sounded to me like I was hearing a babbling brook. I was walking around outside, and it really sounded like there was water running over some rocks somewhere. And I just started I'm trying to walk around and look around. I'm like, why am I hearing this sound? And to me, it was very loud. And it was occupying my time and my mind for about 5 minutes, just walking around outside in the dark and the cold and the snow, and just like, this does make no sense, but because I hear it, I'm going to look around for a creek.
That's interesting, man. Now, with the projects that are happening, say today, I can't imagine the enhancements that could be going on today, the different types of things that could be going on besides what they did to you in your childhood. But I'm wondering if you think there are still these kind of childhood MK Ultra type projects going on today, and if how advanced do you think they possibly could be?
This is exactly why I do what I'm doing. I want to connect the dots because for me, I see no reason to believe that they stop these programs. I'm very concerned that children are still in harm's way. I have traveled large portions of this planet, almost pole to pole, and I'm not finding good news. I'm finding technology that's being presented. On one hand, they're saying it does this. On another hand, they're saying it does that. On one hand, they're saying it's off. On another hand, it turns out that it's on. So all of these people that are up to no good, I have no reason to believe them. I have no reason to trust them. And I pay attention to the whistleblowers that are coming out of the woodwork now and trying to do the right thing. There's folks like Dr. James Giordano. He recently spoke to West Point cadets. I mean, this isn't a joke. He was there as the technical expert to teach them, the future leaders of warfare, what the new battlefield of the future will look like. And in his detail, it's the battlefield of the mind and energy weapons. That's the warfare that we're in right now. So that's what I'm trying to impress upon people is I think I'm finding weapons of war that are being used right now. And if people aren't going to understand what's possible, they have no defense.
Well, let's talk about that. And we got to be careful what we say when we get into this area, but I think you know what I mean. We're in a silent war right now. Not only information, not only psychological, but like you said, there could be silent weapons affecting us right now, especially with let's call it the jabby jab that a lot of people are being exposed to. There's technology in there, guys. Whether you want to fucking admit it or not, there is technology in these jabs that you're getting, okay? Just because you don't want to admit it doesn't mean it's not there, okay? So that being said, this technology, whatever is in there, could be combined with frequencies, energy, technology that may not be too good for you. So, you know... What do you think could be possibly the connection there with this, jabby jab or anything that could be like emitting frequencies to affect our way of thinking, our way of feeling, and our future,
I think that medical bioweapon warfare has always been on the table. And that was also brought up in this communication to the West Point cadets, is that he predicted that nation states will soon attack other nations' populations medically so as to disqualify people from military service. That was stated already, and that's where we're at right now. We're witnessing this. So we're seeing the predictions of experts that said that the battlefield will be changing rapidly to be forewarned. We're on the battlefield right now. We've been warned. We can look at everything that's happening around us, and we can identify what type of weapon it is. It exists. These are all referenceable things. Folks can keep their heads in the sand as long as they want, but what they can't say is that they're as free as they are as Americans as they were 20 years ago. That's an attack on your freedom right there. I'm sure 20 years ago, Chris, you felt a lot more free than you do right now.
Oh, yeah, but it's because that even though I felt free, I was completely imprisoned by the whole thought process and everything that's surrounding us,
Oh, I follow that, but again, you can still see that even back then you were in a mental prison.
Yes, yeah.
And today we're just at a new mental prison by a different definition.
Right. We can just realize that we're in this prison, but there's, seems to be no fucking way out at this point. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for that exit. But, man...
We're getting at a point in the U.S. where disagreement is becoming illegal. It blows my mind.
And if you whine and cry long enough, you get your way and anything you want. And if you think something's offensive, you can shut somebody down.
Yep.
Yeah, it's very terrifying. Now, we've got some comments about millimeter waves in the chat and 5G radio waves. Is this something that you think we need to be concerned about, these developments, 5G, 6G?
Absolutely, 100%. I think it is absolutely a viable threat. Worthy of investigation and research, and every precaution should be had. Because what do we know of the people that are applying these technologies? What has history shown us time and time again is that they will certainly say one thing and do another. And
Star Knight has a comment here. 5G phones could be a weapon. Well, phones have been a weapon for a long time, guys. Like, look at some of the younger generation. They can't even wake up and function out of bed without grabbing their phone. It's like they're on heroin or something. They can't do anything without having their phone with them constantly. I see pictures of people with their kids nowadays, and their kids, it's always like this. The phone is always in the picture. And this is terrifying, guys. Like, this is our future. We're going to have this technology connected to people in the future because they can't live without it. I think that's one of the agendas, this transhuman agenda. But yeah, they've already weaponized cell phones. What do you think about that, Eric?
I agree 100%. I no longer carry my cell phone with me. I leave my cell phone on my kitchen counter. I pretend it's a landline because I can function that way.
Nice. Yeah.
I am aware that life functions without cell phones. Life can function without computers, and I'm actually from the generation where I lived without them entirely, and I'm going to say we got sold a Bill of Rights, that they're to our detriment. They did not give us all the conveniences that we wanted. They're more of a noose and a problem. Back in the day, you didn't get your identity stolen. Back in the day, you didn't get anything compromised. Nobody could take the cash out of your pocket unless they had faster fists. Well, and life was, I would say, better then.
It is, and
You didn't have to worry about it.
it's getting pretty scary with the technology's capabilities now. It seems like your Facebook and some of the things are reading your damn mind. I could be thinking about something and I'll scroll across it, and I'm like, I know that did not come out of my mouth. How is this showing up here? And it makes you think, how deep does this technology go? You know?
Yeah, it's listening to everything that we say. You're 100% right. It's undeniable. Everybody knows it, and they're just sloughing it off like it means nothing. It means nothing that the government's listening to every word that we say. Oh, and the private corporations and everybody in the mix. Everybody that you hit that terms and conditions and you hit check and you're allowing everybody all of your stuff, and everybody goes, well, it doesn't matter. No, it does matter. It totally matters, because that's the way of the world that we're in now, because we've given all of our information to the corporations that now processed it to make the TV and the news all the appropriate level of misinformation and disinformation to lie convincingly.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, it's very concerning, especially about the future, our future generations. I have younger kids in my life that I interact with and try and help out, and give them a little bit of my insights into life and things like that. And not all the kids are brainwashed and just stuck on their phone all the time. They've got a lot of good, smart kids out there with good, smart parents that are leading them in the right direction. But we can't let that ball drop. We got to keep that going. And I think that we're kind of getting in trouble with some of these younger generations of parents who are letting that ball drop. And it's creating this new generation of people who are just like, you cry, you get what you want. You can shut down anybody if you're offended by them, and we need to turn this around before this keeps going, and this is destroying ourselves, really.
Mm-hmm. I feel like as Americans, we need to prioritize teaching our children to be bold. And this is another one that I think this is the most American thing out there: dissent. That is the definition of how we became America, through dissenting.
Yes.
Not through complying, not through listening. If we listened, we'd be British. That's the American way, is to dissent. The American way is to resist. The American way is to have checks and balances in our system. Just out of curiosity, if anybody wants to write in, can you let me know what the checks and balances in our system for the CDC?
Oh, yes, please.
Right? I'd love to hear that one.
I got a good comment from CE5 Circle again, talking about whatever they're spraying in the air that could be attributing to some of these technologies and weaponry that they're using. I've had tons of different views on this. I have some people that think they're trying to save the planet by spraying this shit in the air to reflect radiation because cosmic forces are going to destroy the planet, or that they're spraying it to poison us, which I don't know. I mean, aren't they poisoning themselves if they're spraying it in the air too? I really have no idea what's going on with this. I just know it can't be good. What are your thoughts about what they could be possibly putting in there?
A super multifaceted technology. Once again, I believe it's all of the above. I think that this is how they do things. They'll get funding from many directions. So it is going on. We can look up in the skies and we can see it happen. There will be factions that are getting funded for the purposes of saying that it's geoengineering, and we'll get studies and we'll do that. Then there's also going to be factions that are going to be saying that, but it's the barium and we're going to use it for mind control and it's going to negatively impact the people. They'll get funding for it that way. Then they'll also say, well, you know what? It also turns out that this stuff is actually going to be detrimental to the forest, so we'll do studies on that. But it's also going to make it burn faster, and we know that, so that we'll also get funding because now we're going to have more forest fires. It almost doesn't stop. There's also folks out there that are saying that it's additionally a technology that when they put all of these nano-sized metals out into the air, that you can also energize it with a phased array. And that now that energized field is used for the high-tech UFOs and UAPs, wherever they're from, whether they're ours, foreign, off-planet, whatever. Folks are saying that these systems are used for tracking them. That's why they're up there.
Interesting.
So that they're putting a film up there, and although you can't see or detect by standard methods, once that energized field is up there and that's breached, there's your detector.
Very, very interesting. Man, we live in extremely fascinating and terrifying times. Now, what do you think about this pseudo disclosure that's going on? We've had some major backpedaling recently when it comes to this. It doesn't seem like we're going to get any more information anytime soon. But for a while, almost like a year and a half, we were getting like UFO mania in the media, and it was like they're trying to plant this seed, and all of a sudden it just stopped. They're like, "Meh, let's not talk about it anymore." Well, what do you think is going on there?
It's not disclosure at all. It's not
No, it's
disclosure. It's not disclosure. You cannot take someone who was previously paid to lie to you and then say, guess what? I'm not being paid to lie to you anymore. Now I'm telling you the truth. It's a farce. It's a total joke. The only thing that this disclosure accomplished was the government admitting they had lied previously. That's it. That's all it confirms, is that they're like, you know what? There are UFOs and we don't know what they are. And it's like, yeah, we knew that. We always knew that. We're waiting for you to say something more than that. And they didn't. So it was their choice to just, sit there twiddling their thumbs, as the only benefit from this is as they left the door unlocked. That's it. They unlocked the door, they opened the door to let everybody else have a discussion, but they didn't join the discussion.
Right. Yeah, it's more of, I think, some kind of culture creation so that they can slowly groom us for something not good. It's never good, but I think that that's all that this is, and that the only disclosure is going to come from us. But I apologize. Corey Anderson has been asking a question that I forgot to get to, so let me get to this. He wants to know your opinion on Plum Island and possible, development of Lyme disease and things of that nature.
Dead on. Great question. Plum Island is where Lyme disease came from, post-World War II. There was only one person on the planet. It was a Nazi scientist. I can't remember his name. I apologize. Only person on the planet that was attempting to make diseases ride on bugs. It didn't happen at the time, not to the detriment of humanity. After World War II, he went to work, guess where? Plum Island. And then shortly after this person started working on Plum Island, next thing you know, we get ticks that carry diseases found in Lyme, Connecticut, which is just upwind north of the facility.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, that's where it came from.
I forget her name. I had a young lady on that was talking about that very thing and the CIA involvement with the development of Lyme disease, and it's so disgusting. But it's not. It's on par. It's on par with everything else. We as a people are an experiment for these people, and we need to realize that and rise up. And it's time. It may be time to actually take some of these guys out. I think that's the only way that this is going to change. I've never been a violent person, but I'm getting sick of this. I'm getting sick of everything going on. I understand
100%. I'm a peaceful person. I don't start trouble, but
right.
But I finish it, so to say. Like if someone I don't throw hands unless someone hits me, but if they hit me, it's like, well, you know what? You started this, it just is what it is at that point.
Right.
But I don't start trouble. But with that being said, I think our enemies know that. I mean, that's what they're doing. I mean, there was a whole trust the plan movement that was going on for a while that I think people are now learning the error of their ways for trusting that plan. That in and of itself was a pacifying technique that was planned for.
It sure was. Now, I guess a good way to close out today would be maybe giving a few words of encouragement or hope. I know it's kind of dark and bleak right now, but
that's great.
What do you think is the next step for us? We've been getting out the information left and right while we still have these platforms available. I don't know how much longer than that's going to be because, again, they're starting to ramp up again on censorship and shadow banning and things of that nature. So we're getting the information out there. I think the next step is organizing groups, man. We need to get out of the house. What do you think?
Yep, I agree 100%. I want to impress upon people, resistance is never futile. That's also BS programming. Resistance is never futile. It is obligatory. That's where we are at right now. I call on everyone to do a full court press on resistance on every level you can. Make it difficult for them to be oppressive. Push back. As an example, I am not a fan of the TSA. I think that goes against my rights as an American. But I have no choice in the matter. When I fly, I have to interact with the TSA. What I do is I make that person's job as hard as I can. And I suggest everybody does that. We should not make life easy for our oppressors on any level. Resist, 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 promote resistance. When you see somebody else resisting, get their back. As an example, when we had the mask regulations going on in the stores and there was a limited amount of resistance going on, I saw a gentleman not wearing a mask and one of the employees started to harass this other person. I immediately got the other person's back. I don't know him from a hole in the wall, but I went over to the employee and I said, I don't have a problem with what he's doing. Why do you have a problem? And I got his back just because that person was resisting.
Right.
And that's what we need to do. Is we the people are the answer for all of our problems. We don't have leaders. We have rogue public servants. They're public servants and they forgot that. They're not our leaders.
Yep. Man, that is very well said, and I think that's exactly what we need to do. Thank you, everybody in the audience, for your questions. Sorry if we didn't get to yours, but please come back next time. We'll try and get to them. Eric, thank you so much for coming on. That was fantastic information as usual, and we'll definitely be talking to you again soon.
Thank you very much, Chris.
Awesome, man. Well, until next time.